Hello, everyone. Okay, so we're talking about Stranger Things 5 Volume 2 because it was something. I'll say that. If you happen to see my very long rant I posted on my community tab the other day after it came out, you will probably already have an idea where this video is going. But basically, I have issues with this volume, like a lot of issues. I'm going to be focusing mainly here on the issues with Mike and Will in this volume, not just Byler, but their characters individually as well, because I know that's probably what you're all the most interested in. And as I don't have much time until the finale comes out, I'm just going to be focusing on that for now. And it's also where a lot of the problems do lie. But for people saying that this is just Byler's being bitter that they haven't got enough scenes or whatever, the problems stretch out a lot further than just Byler. There's wider character and plot problems and everything with the writing that I will touch on. Okay, so now I've had time to collect my thoughts on this topic, I've managed to somewhat structure them in this video into different concerns and problems I have. To answer the question you probably all want to know, do I have Byler doubts? Yes, I do, quite a lot to be honest, but I haven't lost all hope. No, I still have some hope. So I'm going to split this video into two main sections. First, discussing the many concerns I have with this volume on how Will's story arc, Mike's character, and Byler as a whole has been handled, because including Will's coming out scene and also discussing the potential cut scenes that have been going around. Because I thought, bad news first, always. Then I'm going to discuss reasons why I actually still have hope that Byler could happen and it could be an intentional choice they're making here. And in my opinion, the way I think that they could do this and redeem this to a somewhat satisfying ending, perhaps a satisfying ending, to quote Noah from the interview we have all seen by now. First of all, two big disclaimers here. The critiques I have here are directed towards the writers, directors, executives, anyone at Netflix who had to say, anyone in charge of the plot, writing, tone of the scenes, and censoring what was allowed to be involved. Because other aspects of this volume were actually great. The actors were phenomenal all round, and the visual design was also amazing. And there were some parts I really loved, like the whole Dustin storyline was very emotional. I found it very relatable. I loved it. Also, some of the Lumax stuff I thought was great. It wasn't all bad. However, the writing on the whole did have a lot of issues. Secondly, whilst I am heavily criticising the writers here, please still keep in mind that these are real people. While I feel like it's definitely fair and a good idea to criticise these things and make it clear to them how we feel about the choices they've made, please don't be sending actual threats to these writers, because that's just not a great thing to be doing. I wanted to say here at the end of the day it's just a TV show, but also I don't want to say that because, as I've discussed extensively before, it is so much more than that. All media, fictional or non fiction, has a huge impact on society. I'd go as far to say, especially on younger generations, one of the biggest impacts that anything has on how we see things. And especially from a show like this with such a large global audience, it really does matter. But anyway, I'm going to move on now and go into my points. Okay, so I thought I'd start off with the elephant in the room, Will's coming out scene. Okay, so I thought I'd start right off with the biggest concern here I have about this volume, and that was Will's coming out scene. In my opinion, it was so badly written, the tone was just wrong, and it felt just so impersonal to give Will's character this moment, and I just don't understand it. If you watch the latest interviews from the Duffers and they talk about how they've been building up to this moment for seasons and spent ages rewriting it to get it exactly right, I don't know how they could have just got it so wrong. And it's not even so much the actual words that were said, but just the tone, the setting, and the context that the scene happened in. And before I break down exactly what I thought was wrong with this scene, I just wanted to say, if you enjoyed this scene personally and it touched you in some way, you found it relatable or cathartic in any way, that's totally valid. You're allowed to feel whatever you like, and I'm glad you felt that for you and it helped you in that way. These are just my personal opinions and opinions shared by many others on the internet, unfortunately. But yeah, if you enjoyed the scene and it resonated with you, that's totally valid, and I'm glad. Okay, so my first complaint is, why was everyone there? Firstly, why on earth was it basically half of Hawkins? Why? Just why did this happen? I know the like in-show reason for this, but it doesn't make sense. So the reason is that Vecna can't use this against him. Fine. So tell your family, and maybe the other three in the core four, maybe even L too, but not Robin, Steve, Nancy, Vicky, Murray, Mr. Clark, Callie. I mean, Callie has literally just met him that day. She could not care less. She has a bigger things to be worrying about right now. And at this point, they might as well just turn on the radio broadcast and let the whole of Hawkins know in one go. If that's the route they're taking, just in case they could have used it against anyone else in Hawkins. This choice, apart from making no sense as to why some of these characters would need to know this, just takes away any of the personal nature that this moment should have and could have had. If it were just to Joyce or Joyce and Mike or Joyce, Jonathan, Mike, or even just the main family and friends. But why are they making this a public announcement? In a recent interview of Noah, he even compared this to a press conference. That is not a positive thing to be equating this moment to. Just think about that. And the thing that irks me even more about this is it just fuels the Byler haters who say that Byler and coming out and being accepted wouldn't be realistic in the 80s. Because no, it's not really realistic if you write it like this. And it just makes us look like the crazy ones. When I can tell you how many other ways that we've Byler's a pitch over the years about how this could have happened in a such more realistic and nuanced way that would have had much more emotional weight and wouldn't have taken you out of the story in this way, because it wouldn't have felt so out of character and out of context for the time that this happened in. It felt to me very much like they were looking at the story with a modern lens and they wanted to include this big coming out scene that all these sort of shows seem to want to have, just to show that they can and have the bragging rights of saying they made the brave choice of writing a gay character in without actually making any brave choices, but instead just sticking to the blueprint coming out scene that we've seen 1,000 times at this point and that they think the audience will just eat up without any thoughts of it for the actual characters. I mean, the whole thing just felt like some sort of humiliation thing. You could tell Will as a character was super uncomfortable in this scene. He was not ready for this, and it was just a hard watch. I'll put it that way. From a Will's character perspective, knowing that this would not be how he wanted this to happen. And I feel like that's probably a good time to segue into my second major problem with this scene, and that's the fact that is basically Will being forced to come out by his abuser. Whether you like it or not, this is basically what happened in the scene, and it's not good at all. Will's justification for why he came out here was that Vecna showed him things, and him being alone and becoming distant for his friends or something like that, if he didn't come out, and that could be used against him. And so that he had to do this so that Vecna wouldn't use it against him, and that he could come along for the final battle or something and not be left behind. Even I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around that logic just saying it. Now, I do have some theories on what Vecna could have showed him that could somewhat make sense and redeem this moment in retrospect, which I'll cover in my Byler Hope section at the end. But first of all, why didn't we see this? My actual first thought watching this was that he was just talking about the stuff Vecna showed him back in episode 4, because I thought it'd be weird if they didn't show us anything new, so it must be that. But I don't think that's what he was talking about. My second thought was he was going to talk about the stuff that Vecna did to him in the Upside Down initially when he went in back in season 1, like we saw in the first 5 minutes, and maybe even some of the stuff his dad put him through, because he's talking about it not being fake, real memories that happened. And also now looking at some stuff I mentioned later on, I feel like this could have potentially been the plan and they cut it out because it would have been had an age rating too high with some of those topics. But anyway, they should have showed us something that Vecna showed him. Because, I mean, this is writing 101 here. I mean, I was taught this in secondary school, for goodness sake. Show, don't tell. Why wouldn't you show us this? If it's the major catalyst in this big scene that you've built up, why the hell wouldn't you show us what happened? It just doesn't make sense. Secondly, this frames the whole scene as your abuser basically outing you, or rather forcing you and blackmailing you in a way to come out that takes away your autonomy over why or when or who you come out to. And I know some people will argue that the whole point here was Will was ignoring Vecna and this was instead him coming out on his own terms before Vecna would use it against him. And I think this probably was the intention of the writers during this scene, but I have to argue strongly against this, because having someone basically say, in a few hours' time, I will out you to everyone, or use this against you in the way that will make them literally all die and the world will end. This context isn't coming out on your own terms. It's effectively blackmail from your abuser, and it's just such a bad message to be sending to anyone dealing with this, because in a real world context, say you're a kid at school, they may have people bullying them, they may have bullies that have found out this about them and are threatening to share it with people, so they have to quickly go tell their friends before the bullies do. Like, this just seems a weird message. Like, that's not how you should be framing this moment. And I'm gonna move on now because it makes me so mad. So yes, and I thought I'd add, just to not sound too biased, and because I feel like people would point this out, I and other people before this volume came out had argued that a way we'd like this to happen would be Mike and Will coming out to each other in some sort of way where one of them was backnerd, and it was kind of forced out in this kind of psychological horror aspect of the story. But I want to say, while this having some similarities in what actually happened, it is not at all the same context, because in that scenario, it was like coming out to one person, the person you liked, very intimate and personal setting. It was not broadcasting it as quickly as possible to as many people you can before it could be used against you to literally end the world. Hopefully you see what I mean here. I just wanted to clarify because I can already feel the hate coming my way on that aspect. Okay, so my last major point on this is Will saying Mike is his Tammy. Because what on earth is that? I have theories about this, and that is just Will gaslighting himself after what Vecna showed him, but again, I'll save that for the end in my Byler Hope section. But for now, just to assume that if we take this for what it is and that this is the truth and this is how Will really feels, this is so stupid. It's telling the audience to just take things from the show at face value and not to read anything into it or explore the logic of the show. And there are some interviews by the writers that back this up, that this was their intention, and I really hope it wasn't, and there is something else going on here. But there are multiple visual parallels made to Robin and Vicky and then Mike and Will, which I and many other people have discussed before. Mike and Tammy's stories actually have nothing in common. The actions and looks we see between Mike and Will's videotape that had Mike accepting him as who he was as a major part of it, whereas Robin only had hers, and that was the point. All these filmmaking and acting choices that were intentionally made and that are part of the whole experience of watching visual media. What, they just don't matter now? No, of course not, the duffers say. It's only what the characters say that matters. It doesn't matter if their actions say otherwise. It doesn't matter if their facial expressions say otherwise. It doesn't matter if the cinematography and the set design say otherwise. It doesn't even matter if the plot and everything we know about these characters up to this point says otherwise. If a character says something in a show, everything else can be disregarded. This now is the definite and ultimate truth. This is not good writing, and this is the case. Can I make myself any clearer here? And honestly, I don't know why, as writers, you'd want this to be how the audience viewed you when you're writing. Surely, given the chance, even if this wasn't your original intention, you'd want to be seen as good, complex, well thought out storytellers, not just ones who have whatever random dialogue said is meant to be taken at face value. It makes me so mad, guys, and because this is what happens in a lot of other of these random Netflix type shows. And I really don't want Stranger Things to become another one of these shows, because something that's set it apart for years is it's character driven and it's meant to be analysed like a movie. It's not just a TV show. And I'm just not even kidding at this point. I don't know how, after the such beautiful and emotional ending of episode 4 that resonated with so many people, how you could then end up with this. I'm just so disappointed here. Okay, so now we're going to be moving on before I absolutely lose my mind and talk about something that will probably make me lose my mind even more, to be honest. Rumours of the cutscenes. Okay, so I think I have to address these rumours. which I didn't originally intend when I was starting to write this script because I only heard about them last night. And I'll start off by saying this is currently all just speculation. But given how much of it is going around on social media at the moment, I thought I should probably address it here. I'll talk more about this, I think, after the finale, because then for sure we'll know definitely what's happened and if any behind the scenes scenes were just put in the finale and shuffled around. But basically, in case you don't know, there's this document that's been going around, I think it started on Twitter, about speculation that there was some last minute interference, perhaps from Netflix or the writers or whatever, and at some point there was a lot cut out of Volume 2, which could explain the odd pacings, weird plot holes, and unsatisfying character journeys. It mostly surrounds Will and the potential that there was going to be more heavy focus on Byler, and also a deeper exploration of the trauma he faced. Now, there are some things in this document surrounding leaks and specific storylines, which honestly do make a lot of sense to me and would fit in with some of the plot holes that we see in this volume. And apparently, they have come from sources of leakers that have been valid and other things and that have come true from the past. But I'm not going to focus too much on that because that's just leaks. It's just speculation. Whereas some of these plot hole things, I feel like are more concrete and we can see. So that's what I'm going to focus on. So to summarize this current evidence pointing at something like this happening, firstly, there is multiple cast and crew statements that just don't match up with what we saw in this final cut. Again, obviously we haven't seen the finale yet, but this includes, but is not limited to, John Levy saying Noah and Finn carry a lot of emotional weight this season. Currently, we haven't really seen any emotional weight from Mike's character. Like, anything at all. We also had Noah saying that he spent most of the time filming this season with Finn, which we also haven't seen. So far, they've had one on one scene, I think, and not even very much group scenes together. And I just don't even think that this could be resolved in the final episode, which also seems very group focused. So I feel like this is a bit fishy. Then we have Finn saying the Duffer Brothers said the painting will pay off. Obviously, this could still happen in the final episode, but this is a big thing that currently is left unresolved. And then there's also some quotes. I think this could have been from Noah, but I can't remember to be honest. About Will's story involving confronting issues of abuse, especially from his dad, which again, we haven't seen so far. There are also a lot of plot holes in this volume which could be explained by these potential cut scenes. These scenes have, again, as I said, been speculated about in leaks, but there's no official confirmation, but they do line up with the plot holes. A lot of the Max stuff just doesn't make sense, to be honest, because when she comes back, her and Elle reunite in a very odd way. Not as if they haven't seen each other for a year and a half, but as if Elle was surprised to see her physically again in the real world. Also, Max isn't surprised to be greeted by Hopper, who last she knew was dead. Apparently, people being brought back to life doesn't faze her anymore. She also suddenly seems very close to Will when they reunite, despite them not really being close at all before, only having a couple of group interactions in season 3 and then him moving to California and she not seeing him since then. And also, she knows about his powers. She called him a sorcerer, despite previously, when he was possessing Vecna, not knowing about this and assuming that this was from Elle, which was made very clear in her conversations with Holly about it being Elle. The theory is that in Escape from Camazotz, there were some scenes between Elle, Will, and Max, and maybe Holly in Camazotz, where Elle went to rescue Will, who was in Camazotz. And it would also explain why the whole Will being unconscious and in Vecna's mind, Camazotz, whatever you want to call it, was resolved so quickly because it felt very much like Elle just went in the bathtub, chucked some vines away, and then everything was great. It just seemed to. There wasn't much stakes there. And it seems like something could be missing. There are also rumours about potentially what Vecna could have shown Will in these visions that Will said prompted him to then come out. Because unless some of this is then later on revealed, it doesn't make sense this isn't included because, again, show not tell. There is speculation that this focused more on his past trauma in the Upside Down, similarly to what was shown in the first 5 minutes, but more in depth and more about the abuse he suffered with under his dad as a child, This would make sense with the statements I previously discussed, and also with the rumours that the age rating this season was going to be upped due to some of these themes that this would have covered, which would have had to up the ratings. Also, I think it would just make more sense then with what Will says to Joyce before coming out. Something I actually speculated about even before reading all this stuff. Because he talks about Vecna not tricking him, but showing him real things, real memories. But if all Vecna showed him, as he says later, is him pulling away from his friends in the future, this doesn't match up. But Vecna preying on his past abuse and making him remember it would make a lot more sense, and also, especially if it involved his dad and previous stuff he felt he couldn't open up to Joyce about because of this trauma, would make a lot more sense why he wanted to talk to her about this. There were also several scenes that felt very weirdly cut. The biggest one that comes to mind for me is where Mike walks in to find Will and Joyce on the couch. We all know the one I mean, we saw it in so many trailers. And then nothing happens. It makes this whole scene feel very irrelevant. And considering it was one focused a lot on in early trailers, this feels very odd. Unless the scene was only made to include in trailers and get the Byler fans invested, which honestly wouldn't even surprise me at this point, and would be a very cruel thing to do. It just feels such a pointless scene because every scene is meant to move the story forward, and this one didn't. And we had so many speculations about what was going to happen here, and in the end, nothing happened. That was just it. Nothing happened. And lastly, and I don't think this is on the document, it's just me being annoyed, the random 5-minute group trip into the Upside Down, where so many people, including Mike, who had never seen it before, seemed just very unfazed by the Upside Down. He doesn't care that this was the place where his best friend got lost in for a week when he was like 11. He doesn't seem fazed at all. And it seemed very unnecessary that they all just went along in the Upside Down together, including Murray and Mr. Clark and Vicky, just for the fun of it. Just for about 5 minutes, then to grab the others and then come back out. Surely something else had to have happened there, or else what on earth is that about? The Upside Down isn't scary anymore if you just have a 5-minute school trip in there together. This is probably only just scratching the surface, but hopefully it demonstrates my point. There are so many behind the scenes pictures as well that just don't make sense and that we haven't seen happen. And again, there is one more episode, but still, it seems like things that we would have expected to happen earlier on, some of these things. And also there's stuff about water safety people being hired for episode 5, but there is nothing regarding water safety in the final cut. And also the rumours that the runtimes were originally much longer and were effectively more like movies each episode. And also the stuff that I think it was the Duffer Brothers posted on Instagram about them editing the final volume and the finale very close to being released, and even after volume 1 they were posting this. I mean, this could just be small things. I don't know much about how this process usually works, so maybe I'm mistaken here, but it begs the question, why was this editing happening so late? In general. And lastly, there is the interviews that they had ready to go straight after Volume 2 release, confirming that the Jancy scene was a breakup and that Mike knew that he was the one Will had a crush on. You wouldn't do this if you had faith in your story that it was understandable, because they haven't done this before, as far as I'm aware. But to me, and to many others, this suggests there must have been some other things in relation to these moments that would make intended interpretations of the scene much more clearer. Moments perhaps after where Jonathan and Nancy had a talk and confirmed that this was a breakup, or moments before Will coming out where him and Mike had some heart to hearts and it made Mike's realization here more obvious. And also all those WSQK basement hints that we got aired on the radio station we're told to pay attention to, and heavily hinted towards the Byler scene there, and Sean Levy saying some of his favourite scenes that he directed in this volume took place in a basement. This never paid off. Again, unless it's happening in the finale, what was all this about? And some of those potential leaks did include scenes with Mike and Will to songs by The Cure, which I'm just not even going to get my hopes up because that would have been amazing. But again, that's all leaks, just speculation. We don't actually know. And finally, maybe this whole cutscene speculation thing is just us clutching at straws, hoping that the writers haven't completely lost it. But it does seem plausible, even if not all of this is true, that some of these things, especially some of the Camazot storylines and the things related to cuts due to the age rating, it does make a lot of sense, to be honest. And it does also make sense why the writing quality of this volume seems to have taken a dive off a cliff compared to everything else we've seen before. Because at the last minute they had to randomly cut stuff, then there's obviously going to be plot holes and the pacing and character development is going to seem weird. And also, I've looked at the original scripts from earlier seasons and I've made videos about this, breaking them down, and I intend to do this even after the show is finished. Because there were a lot more obvious Byler hints that didn't make it through the final cut, or that were just heavily reduced, removed entirely, or rewritten. And honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if something like this had to happen here because they didn't get approval to put this in the show. Again, I tried to focus here more on the plot holes and behind the scenes stuff that didn't match up rather than just the leaks because I don't know how real they are, but they do seem to match up. I'm just focusing on what we know for sure, and also just so I don't get too mad about what we could have had. Anyway, I'm going to have to stop talking about this now before I actually lose it. And I'll go on to the question I know a lot of you are all waiting for. Do I think Byler could still happen? Okay, so when I was writing the opening of this with all the my promises of Byler hope, this is before any of the speculations on the cuts have been going around, and when I wrote that last section, if you couldn't tell, I was very riled up about it all, and perhaps made it sound more negative than the situation actually could be. So I'm going to try and be optimistic here. Though firstly, a disclaimer. Due to all the speculation of Netflix censoring a lot of the original plan and or potential terrible writing and poor handling of Will's story and Mike's character so far, it does make me have doubt that all this setup we've seen throughout the seasons will even pay off, or to be honest, even if I want it to pay off, because if they're not going to handle this story with care, part of me doesn't want to see it happen for the sake of it happening if it's going to be done bad. But anyway, for this segment of the video, I will try and ignore any doubts I have and just talk about how, if I were in the writer's room with this being released, with just the finale to go, how I would go about redeeming this, and if it's at all possible, and all the potential Byler hints we have actually gotten, and that can make it still possible. Because it is very much still possible, and I could see it happening. So, how could Byler still happen? Well, to me, the biggest possibility is the stuff that Vecna showed Will, which we currently don't know about. Will said that this was his friends pulling away from him, but what if it was actually showing Mike not loving him back? We know from the flashback scene that Vecna showed him in season 4 were two key moments where he felt like he lost any chances of Mike's love being reciprocated. The scene where he tore down Castle Byers, and the scene after he'd given Mike the painting and gave up on him in the van. And if this were the case, it would explain the sudden shift in attitude from the previous day, where he had hope and was asking Robin about how she started talking to Vicky, to now, where he seems to have lost all hope and accepted that Mike could never love him back. Maybe this scene was Vecna's work, and maybe will share the truth about what he actually saw in the next episode. And this could be where we have that Mike POV we've all wanted, or the flashback, to show the truth about these moments and recontextualize them for Will, and let him see that Vecna has twisted all these memories, and that's actually not how Mike feels at all. I felt like this would be very powerful and emotional if it was done correctly. Secondly, the whole Mike is Tammy thing would fit into this theory. It's a way for Will to gaslight himself, to minimize his own feelings and try and stop the pain, to rip off the band aid, as he said in season 4. The fact that he's literally using someone else's words here to try and make sense of this just aids this idea that he's confused to me, and that perhaps this isn't what he actually really believes deep down. It's just what he's telling himself. Also, because if he actually thought this and was confident in what he was saying, I don't think he would use Tammy as an example, because no one except Robin, Steve, and maybe Vicky would understand this reference at all. It's just him scrambling at things and trying to make sense. Minimizing your own feelings like this and not being able to identify and accept them for what they really are is a common coping and defense mechanism, and would be an explanation for this. And also, in this big moment where he's coming out to everyone, it would kind of make sense for him to try and say, "Oh, I just had this crush on someone in the past." he's not really going to say, this guy here, Mike, I've been in love with him for years. I still love him to this day, but he doesn't feel the same way. Like, to be honest, that would not be realistic for him to say that, and also would not really be fair on Mike. So that's perhaps another explanation why he tries to minimize this down to a crush, because he's speaking to all these people. He's not going to come out and say he's in love with Mike Wheeler in this moment, in this, situation. Now that I've had a chance to calm down and think about it, that does kind of make sense to me. Also, there were unproportionately more shots of Mike's reaction during this scene than anyone else in the group. Maybe this was just because Will was talking about him, and according to the Duffers, Mike realizes here that he was the one Will liked, but maybe Mike is also realizing something else in this scene. While it may not be the angsty realization we'd hoped for, now Mike knows that Will likes boys and specifically liked him at some point. This may make it a lot easier for him to open up and talk to him about it. And to all those still arguing that Mike is not a queer coded character, I want to draw your attention to this song choice that Mike specifically chose for their final battle. And this isn't something just in the background that we've apparently overanalyzed. This is explicitly stated in dialogue by Robin. The name of this band and the band themselves are very gay. I'll just leave this here on the screen for you and leave it at that. Also, I want to circle back to the Robin and Will conversation at the start of episode 5, where Will was asking Robin how she approached Vicky, and so far all these conversations with Robin have been used to basically spell out things for the audience in what to look for and what's going to happen. Her steps were, she accepted herself, she came out to someone, and then she was able to talk to Vicky. And right now, who else is Will going to want to talk to here? Who is his Vicky? It's Mike. He's done step 1, he's done step 2. Where is step 3? We need to see it now. The last thing is the Duffers say that there is a big plot twist. And I don't think we've seen this yet. I don't think the wormhole thing was the big plot twist to me, because we did see that kind of coming. And to have this Byler twist in the final episode could be this plot twist. They have mentioned their favourite ship before. I have not watched the show where the ship is, but it's basically a gay ship from a TV show that is seemingly unexpected and came together all in the final episode of the show. So perhaps that is their plan here. They've also said about plot twists that the best ones are ones that are set up but that you just don't see coming. Again, this would make sense. All the other couples in the show, Jancy and Lumax, have had some sort of resolution or clarification at this point, but not the Mike L. Will situation, who are arguably the main characters in this show. My only fear here is that this may feed into the discourse that this ship has come out of nowhere, or that they just wanted to include a gay ship and that it doesn't make sense. And if they don't do it right with such little time left, it could appear this way, unfortunately. And we all know that we'll be the ones getting the backlash for this and being called delusional and whatnot and pushing this on people, even though we gave ways that this could have been built up much more clearly and slowly. But anyways, not going into that here, or else I'm gonna get mad all over again. Okay. So I think that's where I'm going to end this video, because I've been trying to write this for ages now. New things keep coming out, and at this point, I just need to accept that I'm not going to be able to cover it all in one video, and I just need to get this out there for you guys. Thank you for all your patience, I will add, because this took much longer than I said it would. Partly because extra things kept coming out, like the potential cutscene stuff, and partly because honestly, every time I sat down, I just kept getting really angry about this and struggling to write my thoughts down and being very frustrated, especially when I heard about the cutscene stuff. That got me angry for pretty much the whole day and postponed this a lot. But anyway, here we are. Normally at the end of my videos I say I hope you enjoyed this, but for this one I'm not sure that's particularly applicable, but I hope maybe you found it relatable, I'll say, and there is still hope. And now that I've calmed down a bit, I might go back and analyse all the potential Byler scenes in this volume and also all the Robin setup stuff if I have time. Honestly, up until now, I've been too angry to even rewatch the show. I'm telling you, I was committed. I was sat here at 1 a.m. on Christmas Day, well, technically Boxing Day, having waited all of Christmas Day for this show. I moved a whole monitor around my room to have like optimal viewing of this show. I was watching it till about 4 o'clock in the morning, and I've been thinking about this non-stop for pretty much a month. I spent most of my time making videos about this topic. It's definitely been my hyperfixation, and I have not let it go out of my mind. And yeah, it was just a bit of a letdown. And said, on reflection, the whole thing wasn't all terrible. There were some points I really liked. I do still have hope, and now I've calmed down a bit. I can see it a bit more with an optimistic light. But yeah, thanks for your patience. Have a great day, and let's stay strong and go crazy together until the finale.